I know that you're looking for a shiny object, a blueprint, a template, a script, something that you can plug and play or copy and paste to fix all of your client acquisition woes today. Well, how many times have you been looking for one of those things, and how many times one of those things actually worked? Probably never, because they don't. What I'm going to do instead is give you a mental model and a strategy and a way of thinking that actually works in helping you get more clients and more appointments. This is not a shiny object. It's not a quick, shiny fix that's going to make all your troubles go away. And it's quite boring. But if you're the kind of person that just wants to hop between shiny object from shiny object for the rest of your life and not actually make any progress in your business, then you're welcome to click off this video. But if you're the kind of person that's serious about actually growing your company and you want to learn how to think critically to solve problems and actually make progress, then this is for you. So let me know if this looks familiar. We're going to be talking specifically about cold outreach here and trying to get clients through methods like cold calling, cold emailing, cold DMing, or any other method where you reach out to someone to try and get clients, which is kind of inevitably what you have to do when you're starting, unless you have an audience, which you don't, or the cash to run ads, which you don't. So let me know if this seems familiar. So here we have day one. And on day one, you send 30 outreaches. And on day two, you get no responses. This is a problem because here's the issue with most people's brains. You are an animal. And I mean that I don't mean that in a demeaning way at all, in a bad way. But my point is that you have a brain, and that brain is an organic structure, and whether we like it or not, we're animals. And your brain is hardwired, because of the current socioeconomic climate of the world, to instant gratification, which means that the majority of the actions that you take in your life are instantaneously gratifying. i.e., if you do something, you get dopamine or you receive a neurochemical reward instantaneously. For example, if you open up social media, you receive content instantaneously. If you eat junk food, you receive instant gratification straight away. You know, if you do it, all of these bad behaviors that you know are bad for you, right? And what that means is that you've been training your brain unconsciously since you were probably a child for instant gratification, where you do an action and you naturally receive immediate feedback, and you have a very closed, tight feedback loop where you do an action and you get a reaction very quickly, which tells you that you've done the right thing. Now, here's the problem. When it comes to business and when it comes to outreach and getting clients, there is what we call latency of gratification, or as most of you might know it, delayed gratification, where when we do an action, time has to elapse before that action creates a result or a desirable outcome that we are wishing for. And so what most people do in their life is they do these actions, all these things over here, you know, whether it's scrolling through short form content, drinking coffee, smoking, doing drugs, playing video games, and all of these actions, they bring about an immediate reaction, an immediate response. And this is kind of bad because most people have basically conditioned their brains to expect instantaneous feedback. Now, why on earth is this a problem, and how does this relate to client acquisition? Well, what happens is when you send 30 emails or messages, or when you make 30 cold calls, you're probably not going to make any progress. You're not going to get any responses. And so, you know, what happens is, you know, on day two, you get 0 responses. And so maybe you send another 30. Okay, so you send another 30 outbound messages. And day 3 rolls around and you still don't have any responses, and so you send 30 more. But what starts to happen as this continues here, and as you send more and more messages but get no responses, is you start getting emotional. And your emotional state starts to fall off of a cliff here, where, you know, it's kind of stable, and then bang, you hit this weird emotional point where you just suddenly start to worry and you start to panic, and usually around like day 3 or 4 of getting no responses on the new copy. And what this emotion does, and basically what happens to people who succumb to this, which is basically everyone at the beginning, is this emotion feeds the system. And what that means is the message or the email, you know, or the script or the template, whatever thing you're using to get clients, you start making little changes. So this sadness, this anxiety, this anger, this frustration that you have with outreach, it starts seeping into your process, and you start making changes, micro changes to this process. Okay, and so, you know, you start creating new iterations, new variables. But the problem is you're making those changes out of emotion as opposed to logic and experiment. Because let's be honest, sending 90 messages and getting no responses is pretty normal. And unless you've got something called regression to the mean, which means you've got a large enough data set to verify and validate the outcome of your experiment, then you don't really have anything. And so you start making changes. And by day 4, you send another 30. And you still haven't booked any meetings, but you're trying something new. And what you do every time you try something new is you're reigniting hope into your life. Because you lose hope as you get no appointments, and then you make these changes and try and reignite the hope. And then, once again, day 5, we still have no appointments. So you send 30 more, or maybe day 5 you send nothing because you've lost faith. But then on day 6, you're like, I need to keep doing this. So then you send 30 more using something completely different. And so, what happens is, we've got sort of version 1 that we're using on day 1, day 2, and day 3. And then we've got version 2 on day 4 and version 3, which means we're trying to cycle through 3 versions of this bloody thing because you've made emotional changes. And then what happens, by some miracle, on day 7, is we land a meeting. And you're like, oh my goodness, it's starting to work. And, you get a meeting. And what people do, and this is very wrong, is they attribute the meeting to the work from the day prior. Because their brains are so engineered towards instant gratification that they can't possibly comprehend that an effect that happened because of something that happened more than 24 hours ago. So what they do is they attribute this meeting to their most recent work. And also they want this change to work because this is their change. So when you make a change, to an outreach system or a script or a process, you ingrain all of your hope and you put a piece of your identity into the change. And therefore you become the change and you want the change to work. And so when something works, you unconsciously, irrationally attribute the result to the change because that's your bias, because it's you. So what could have happened instead is the meeting that we got on day 7 could well have come from the 30 messages that we sent on day 2. But instead, because our brains are so wired for instant gratification and we are unconsciously biased to these little changes that we're making and these little pockets of hope that we want to fill ourselves up with, we attribute it to day 6. And then what that means is we say, oh, okay, well, I need to do more of day 6. But day 6, what you sent on day 6 might not have worked at all. Now, the other thing with this, which is even more important, is understanding the latency of psychology when it comes to follow-ups. So there is also latency or delay when it comes to follow-ups. So I can tell you from experience that if you follow up with people or you message people, here's how you should do it. So you have your first initial message, okay, which is like, hey, I want to talk to you. And then you have a bunch of follow-ups, right? What I can tell you, having sent quite literally probably millions of outreaches, whether that's through, definitely millions, multiple millions of cold calls, cold emails, cold DMs. What I can tell you is that all of the results that you get will come between follow-up 7, 8, and 9, and 10. So what happens here is because people are so wired to instant gratification again, they follow up on someone maybe 2 or 3 times, and because they're so wired to getting instant results, they're not seeing this instant result that they're used to, they basically just stop reaching out and they give up and they just quit on this prospect. But what I can tell you from experience is that the easiest way to get someone to respond to you is to persist. Now, here's the problem. And here's why this whole time thing comes into play. You have to leave time between following up on people, right? So this is message 1 you send on day 1. Message 2 you'll probably send on day 3, and then you have message 3 on day 5, and you have message 4 on day 7, and then maybe you wait like another 3 days, and you maybe wait 14, and then maybe it's day 17, and then we're waiting like 20, and then maybe like 23, and then like 27. So, we're usually leaving between 2, 3, 4 days to follow up on people. Otherwise it's a bit weird and a bit annoying. And I can tell you for a fact that 75 to 80% of the results you get will come from follow-up 7 onwards. And what that means is that 80% of the results that you're going to get from your outreach methods come between day 17 and 27. So the latency, the gratification feedback cycle on cold outreach, on average, if you do it properly and consistently, is between 2.5 to 3.5 weeks. 17 to 27 days, because that's an average follow-up cycle if we're doing like 2 to 4 day follow-up frequency, which is what we want to do because it's best practice. And so what this means is the messages that you send on day one, okay, so if you send 30 messages on day one, it's not going to be until day 17 that you're actually going to start to see results. And it is exponential insofar as that if I draw this out for you here, it is exponential insofar as that if we've got day 17, if we've got follow-up 7, 8, 9, and 10, and we draw the graph like this, then it's exponential. Like you're very much more likely, if I show you this actually, let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we've got all of our follow-ups here, and you know, your chances of getting a response are really low, then they get high and high and high. It kind of goes like this. Okay, so this is when you're most likely to get a response. And the problem is like I said, is people, they do outreach for a day or two, and then they start making all these changes to their process and their system. And after 30 days of mess and 30 days of chaos, which is where they keep changing things and they keep fucking around with things and not being scientific, they maybe get a result or two and they get some meetings, but because they've tested so many variants, because they didn't have the patience to do anything properly, they can't attribute the feedback to the result. And so what this looks like, you know, is that let's say that you know, we have day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's just say someone's doing outreach for 20 days, right? Well, on day 1, they send 30 of something, day 2, and they start going around, and every day, because they're emotional and angry and frustrated and sad that things aren't working for them, they slightly tweak or slightly change the thing. So over the course of 20 days, someone might have tested like, you know, 9 different variants. You know, where every other day they've got frustrated, they've tried a different platform, they've tried a different subject line, they've tried a different offer, they've tried a different technique, they've tried a different Loom script, whatever. People change shit all the time just for no good reason. And let's say that over the course of these 20 days, around day 20, you start getting meetings. So let's say you get 2 meetings on day 20, but you've got 9 variants. So you have no idea where these 2 meetings came from. They came from somewhere in this absolute, you know, pool of chaos that you've created here. These meetings have come from somewhere, but it's worth considering as well that you don't know, like they're very unlikely to have come from 17, 18, 19, 16, 11, 12, whatever, because most meetings are going to come on day 20 from the work you did on 1, 2, or 3. But people don't think about this. They don't think about the latency, and they don't think about the fact that it takes 10 messages sometimes to get someone to reply. So it's all success with cold outreach is all about feedback. It's all about trying random shit and then seeing what happens and then attributing what happens to that random shit. But if you make loads of changes and you get lost in the source and just make loads of variations and you're not scientific, and if you don't stick to prospects for long enough to actually give them the psychological familiarity or leverage that you'd need to get them to reply, then you're not going to get any results. So that's kind of the point I'm making here, is people are so wired to instant gratification that when they send messages, they expect replies or responses immediately, straight away. That's not how outreach works. It's not how psychology works, and it's not how science works. You cannot afford to apply the same monkey instant gratification brain that you have in every other aspect of your life to outreach and sales and business. It will not work, and you will die, and you will lose money. And I know this to be true because this is what I did. I did this for like a year before I figured this thing out. Only once you become scientific will this actually start to work. So stop freakishly trying to change things all the time. Like 30 emails is not enough. And then even then, like let's say that you send 30 emails on day 1. To truly understand the effectiveness of day 1 copy, this version, we need to send another 300. No, more than that. Because we need to follow up on every person 10 times. Anyway, I can't do math. I'm lost in the source at this point. It's too late in the day. But you get my point. My point is that you won't see the effect of day 1 outreach until you've done, 7 to 10 follow-ups. So it's kind of like there's a massive delay, and this is what causes people so much trouble. They're not used to dealing with this in their lives. So I hope this video is somewhat useful to you in aiding with client acquisition. If you want a more streamlined, sort of easy to follow process that just works, there's a link in the description you can click that explains how we help people get more clients. You might not care for it too much, but it is me trying to sell you something in full transparency. But it works really well for client acquisition, so you can check it out. I don't really care if you do or not, but either way, hope you find it useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.